Fernando Salas. I'm the director of the Geointelligence Division for the National Weather Service Office of Water Prediction's Geointelligence Division. In this role, I support several different efforts that are focused on the implementation of geospatial technology in support of the water prediction mission. So that includes the development and implementation of the various different ATLAS products crossing 14 and 15. On the call today with me is Sandra Pavlovic, who is the technical lead of our Meteorological Design Studies Center. And that is the center or the program within the Office of Water Prediction that is comprised of all the technical teams that are working hard to develop and implement ATLAS 14 and 15. So I'm going to start with a general overview, provide some context, give an update on schedule for ATLAS 14 and 15, and then I'll pass it over to Sandra for some additional technical information. Okay, so real quick, just a quick update on NOAA ATLAS 14, because in addition to working hard to implement ATLAS 15, we are working on 2 ATLAS 14 volumes right now. So we're working on ATLAS 14 Volume 12 over parts of the Pacific Northwest. That includes Wyoming, Montana, and Idaho. We're actually getting ready to start the peer review process for Volume 12. So that will be happening as early as this week, but could be next week or in the weeks after. And then we're targeting the final publication of Volume 12 in the summer of 2024. We're also working on Volume 13, which covers Pennsylvania, Maryland, Delaware, Virginia, North Carolina, and South Carolina. We are targeting the final publication for that towards the end of 2025. So, 3 different ATLAS projects that we're working on in parallel here. And just a quick reminder, so, the ATLAS 14 product, that is the stationary product here. That's the underlying assumption to all of it. And included in that product are precipitation frequency estimates for storms that range from 5 minutes to 60 days, average recurrence intervals from 1 year to 1,000 years. All the estimates have confidence intervals that are included. That's all derived from a 800-meter nominal raster grid that comes from a spatial interpolation analysis that accounts for terrain, coastal proximity, and other covariates. And included in all of this and all the values that are provided is numerous consistency checks, lots of quality control to make sure that the data and the product is of high fidelity and it is authoritative. Okay, so each time we go through one of these ATLAS updates here, it's a multi-year process. Included in what we do is a lot of data collection, not only collection of federal data sets, but also regional and state data sets. And then also we work with the stakeholders to collect as much local information as possible. And in many cases, sometimes we find out about local data sets that haven't been digitized yet. And so there's a lot of effort that is put in with our stakeholders to digitize as much as possible so that we can make sure we're leveraging the best information available. After collecting all that, we quality control it heavily. That takes a lot of time. It's very time consuming to go through that. We start extracting annual maximum grids and time series from all that. And then we go ahead and perform the spatial analysis and the interpolation and start preparing the estimates over the area of interest. Peer review is a really important part of this process to help make it authoritative, but also work together with the stakeholders to derive these estimates. And so that is an important part that we support and will continue supporting. And then after we get feedback from the peer review process, we work to adjudicate all of the feedback that comes in. And then we start working towards publishing the final estimates in addition to some supplemental information that we provide. Volume 11 was the last ATLAS 14 volume that we published back in 2018. And so certainly that included some analysis of Hurricane Harvey. We were actually getting ready to start the peer review process when Hurricane Harvey was hitting. And so, of course, listening to all the feedback that was coming, we delayed that process a little bit so that we could make sure to include Hurricane Harvey into the data so we can get feedback on it. So typically, it takes about 3.5 years to go through an ATLAS 14 update. Now, as we've been working towards all those ATLAS 14 updates, certainly climate change has always been part of the conversations about, what is the impact of climate change to the ATLAS 14 methods and the products. And So with the support of the Federal Highway Administration, we were able to conduct an assessment report with some of our academic partners at the Penn State University, University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, and the University of Wisconsin to assess a couple things. One is to see what's the state of the art as it relates to precipitation frequency. And then the second objective was to see, how could we leverage climate model output into the process and the analysis framework to account for climate change. So as a result of that assessment report, we envisioned kind of what is now becoming the NOAA ATLAS 15 product, but essentially a precip frequency product that contains two different volumes. Volume 1 would be derived from historical observations and leverage the trends in those observations to develop precip frequency estimates over the entire country in a seamless fashion. And then Volume 2 would work to develop adjustment factors that can be used in conjunction with Volume 1 to project out those precip frequency estimates into the future and the decades to come, leveraging climate model outputs from the various different scenarios and models that are out there. So that's what was envisioned. And fortunately, with support of the bipartisan infrastructure law, NOAA was provided with an appropriation to actually act on the outcomes of that assessment report and start working towards the implementation of ATLAS 15. So this is the first time that we've had a federal appropriation of this magnitude to support such an effort. And so we're really excited to be working towards this. Now, I will mention that there is language, of course, in the Floods Act that came out that gives NOAA the authority to provide precip frequency information for the country. It also says that NOAA will update the national appropriation. So because it doesn't come with the appropriation, unfortunately, we're getting the bipartisan infrastructure law funds to act on that first update, but we'll have to see what comes in the years ahead as it relates to future updates. Okay, so high-level schedule here. So over the past year, we published that assessment report, and we issued a public notification statement to get feedback from the wide group of stakeholders. We also held a technical workshop in January of 2023 with our federal partners to review the framework and the methodology and gain support for that. And then in April 2023, we started awarding a set of contracts and grants to actually begin the development and implementation effort of ATLAS 15 in earnest. So since then, we've been working on various different things as it relates to ATLAS 15. We'll work through 2024 to continue developing the product. And in 2024, we're also going to be issuing an ATLAS 15 pilot over the state of Montana, which is where we're currently doing ATLAS 14 Volume 12. So with this pilot, this will be the first time that we can show, what ATLAS 15 would look like over a smaller region and start getting feedback from the wide stakeholder group on not only the estimates themselves, but also, how best to disseminate the information. In 2025, we would work on creating the national estimates for ATLAS 15, and then we would work to begin that peer review process over CONUS. In 2026, we'd finish adjudicating all the feedback that was received and then publish ATLAS 15, both Volumes 1 and Volumes 2. And then in 2026, we'd also start the OCONUS peer review process so that we can finish that up in 2027 and publish the final estimates over OCONUS. So that would be Hawaii, Alaska, Puerto Rico, the U.S. Virgin Islands, Guam, the same areas that we cover for ATLAS 14. So our strategy to, go forth and implement this is kind of threefold. We wanted to establish a big contract to work on to develop and implement ATLAS 15. So that includes collecting all the data from national, state, regional, and local entities, work on the quality control of all of that information as well, work to perform the time series analysis and the geospatial analysis to actually generate the estimates, go through the peer review process, support that as needed, and then develop the additional supplementary information that comes with these ATLAS products. So we awarded that contract back in April, and our partners are IBSS, RTI, and Lago Consulting. So we were well on our way with that. Shortly after that, we worked to establish a couple cooperative institute grants. So the cooperative institute that we're working with is called CAIRO, or the Cooperative Institute for Research to Operations in Hydrology. This is the only NOAA cooperative institute that is managed at the Weather Service level, and it's very much focused on the hydrology operational components. So We awarded a couple grants here with RTI, NC State, and the University of Wisconsin to not only evolve the Atlas 15 methodology and framework. This is the framework that was presented in that assessment report earlier this year, and then also look to evaluate the climate model outputs to determine which are most appropriate for this engineering application. And then finally, we're leveraging an existing contract with some of our web designers, Orion Network Solutions, to modernize our web presence as it relates to the precip frequency data sets. So again, working on this strategy in parallel, a lot of the Cairo work will be heavily focused in these first couple of years here to evolve the framework and assess the climate model outputs while we work in conjunction with the contract to implement the pilot, establish this national repository of data, perform the heavy quality control on all of that information, and then start generating the products as we get into the out years here, while also working with our web developers to set up and modernize our websites. So that's the overall strategy, and I will pass it now to Sandra.
Okay, thank you, Fernando. So as Fernando mentioned, we're working with a contractor and grantees to develop the NOAA ATLAS 15 Volume 1 and Volume 2. And the first step or first milestone is to develop the estimates over state of Montana. For the first, we're both planning to deliver Volume 1 and Volume 2 estimates over the state. And the Volume 1 estimates, just to reiterate, will be based on historical observation and accounted trend. And when NOAA ATLAS 15 Volume 1 is developed, it will supersede estimates from NOAA ATLAS 14. We're planning to deliver this data in a ZAR format. It's cloud compatible, but when we develop the website, we're going to provide this data in a format that is needed by the engineering community and public, so not just ZAR, but other formats. For the pilot study, we're looking for a few base durations. We've done in the past also looking probably 3 to 4 durations, the most important duration for engineer application, between 1 hour and 10 days, and looking to develop the estimates for annual exceedance probability up to 1% or 1 in 100 years. And then we will do some comparison with the NOAA ATLAS 14 Volume 12 estimates based on a stationary approach. For the Volume 2, Volume 2 estimates, we're planning to develop adjustment factors from climate model outputs. They're going to be in the same format for the same duration and, of course, the same annual exceedance probabilities. And we're looking for the pilot study to cover 2 scenarios, SSP 2 4.5 and SSP 5 8.5. A lot of these scenarios are really dependent on the data sets that are processed. So I think Ben mentioned National Climate Assessment Report. For the National Climate Assessment Report, LOCA 2 and STAR data sets are used. So we're aligning with the National Climate Assessment Report and using LOCA 2 and STAR. And we are adding additional data sets that are becoming available and accepted by the engineering and water resources community. And we're going to evaluate them all for this particular application. Next slide. I have maybe next 2-3 slides. They're just providing a little bit more technical info on where we are and what progress has been made in the past few months. We had a kickoff meeting on July 15 and with the whole team, and the team got onboarded and already started working, developing the estimates. So for Volume 1 development, the team took over the statistical framework that was developed during the HDSC assessment report, and in collaboration with academia of the Northeast region, and applied it for the area, for different climate region for the area over our current Volume 12 area for Montana, Idaho, and Wyoming. And we made and they made already some comparison with the current NOAA ATLAS 14 estimates. And you can see that their spatial patterns are very consistent, which is a great progress. And then the team is further evaluating spatial temporal covariates in order to made the framework, statistical framework, applicable across the CONUS. And that also includes enhancing some of the weights and regionalization approach to ensure that estimates are seamless across the CONUS. I just want to mention here, for anyone who developed the estimates in a 1 kilometer resolution, this is not a trivial task. It takes a lot of research and effort to develop it. As we also processing really a large number of return intervals and frequencies, this is really a big data-driven product. So we're parallelizing software to ensure that we can develop estimates fast, and then also integrating the expert opinion into the final estimates through visualization and other means. And for this particular work, as Fernando mentioned, we partner with IBSS, RTI, and LIGO Consulting. And next slide, please. So on a volume 2 development, Fernando also mentioned that we're working with the Cairo and NC State. We are particularly partnering with Dr. Ken Kunkel, who's also the lead scientist on the National Climate Assessment Report. And what the plan is to start where we stopped with the HDSC assessment report, take the recommendations, and then integrate additional information and develop the volume 2 over pilot study and also over the CONUS. And so here in the slide, I included kind of the 3 major recommendations from the assessment report, and that is to use the quantile delta change method to develop estimates for volume 2, and to rely on multimodal approach, given that none of the models that we assessed during assessment report, and this also been reported by other research, did not outperform over like all the available data sets, particularly when we compare them to how ability of climate models to mimic extreme precipitation on a spatial and temporal scale over the historical model period. So for the daily duration, I already mentioned we are looking to use LOCA2 and STAR dataset. And these datasets are already available to our PIs. We are also looking to include UWP dataset that show good performance during our assessment report. And here in the slide, you can see some of the initial development. This dataset is available for majority of the CONUS, not over the western part of the United States, but this is based on CMIP 6 scenario. And the University of Wisconsin is developing further this data set over the western part of the United States, where topography is more challenging. This data set will hopefully be available by the end of this year, and then that can be integrated into the pilot study. Next slide. So one of the recommendations from our HDSC assessment report is that the climate models application to hourly durations and rarer frequency, which are above 1 in 100, so 1 over 50 or 1 over 1,000 year estimates, require a little bit further investigation for the application in precip frequencies. And some of the research that Dr. Ken Kunkel and RTI and his team and the collaboration is working on is to evaluate the climate model for the application for sub-daily durations, particularly for Atlas 15 duration. We're developing estimates between 5 minutes and 60 days. And so the plan is to look at the convection resolving climate models, and to evaluate if these data sets show differences between daily scales and hourly scales. And then for the rarer frequencies, look at the large ensemble analysis and look if there is statistically robust differences in change at the 1 over 100 and 1 over 1,000 year estimates. And then if there is, then look further what is the difference producing and why. I think this type of the work just started. And I know that Dr. Ken Kunkel is planning to present some of the research findings and into the annual AMS conference in January of this year. At the same time, we will have two other presentations on Atlas 15. We will have our contractor and RTI partners presenting the work they're doing on enhancing the statistical approach, and also one presentation on overall program. Next slide, please.
How close are you, Sandra, to being done? I just want to make sure we have some questions.
I have one more slide and I'm done.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, that's fine. So here with this slide, I wanted, Fernando mentioned that we have on a science side that we're working with the grantees and contractors to develop the estimates for the pilot and for CONUS. But in parallel, we're also working with Orion Network Solution to develop a website, a new website that will be able to provide the pilot information to public so that we can go through the peer review process. We completed development of markup pages, and here in the slide you can see on the right kind of like a markup pages for the website and how it will look like in comparison to existing web pages. And then our Orion Network Solution partners started developing the website pages for the pilot study. So with that, I think this is my last slide. So I'll kind of stop here and see if we have any questions for Fernando or I.
All right, thank you. Questions? Well, I guess I'll jump in and make a quick one. First of all, it's really nice to hear these presentations, especially in light of the conversation that took place out in Boulder. The quick question I have is, you know, there's a lot of sensitivity around the work that this represents and the start dates for that work and so forth. Do you have a sense of when well, let me just rephrase it this way. There's a lot of sensitivity that we heard about from Ken about when we're going to be able to he's going to really be able to get started. I'm not even going to ask the question. I'm just going to kind of phrase it as, you know, I don't know where these funds are coming from. I don't know what that process is, but, you know, there's a lot of concern that, you know, we get started on some of this work, especially around volume 2, in order to inform Atlas 728, chapter 36. And I'll just kind of leave it at that. Joe?
Dan,
go ahead.
Just to come real quick. So with our timeline right now, focusing on providing preliminary Atlas 15 estimates for volume 1 and 2 in 2025, and then the final publication in 2026. How do you see that aligning with the ASC 7 update process? Are there a particular month or quarter within those years that really need to be targeted to help?
I'm going to defer to Don and Jennifer about that.
Okay.
Thanks, Dan. Still goes back to, yeah, we really need everything peer reviewed and ready by the first of 2025, first quarter 2025.
So final publications by first quarter of 2025.
I wouldn't necessarily say final publications, but peer reviewed enough that everybody's satisfactory with it. Okay. You don't have to have a printed peer article out, okay. But yes.
And first quarter, the calendar year first quarter, right?
Yep.
Okay.
So I just wanted to say thanks to the team for working with Dr. Kunkel. He was funded by DoD to do some of this for research for impact of rainfall on bases in the CONUS, and I think that will help you move along much more quickly. So look forward to working with you on it.
Joe?
Yep. One thing that came out in last Monday's meeting was that there's a large time lag involved in the process, and that it was stated that although the standard may be adopted in 2028, it has to go through the IBC, building council, to get into code recommendations, and that these may not be adopted until the 2030s in some jurisdictions. And in the 2030s, we'll already be on CMIP 8, right? So and also we will also have had another 10 years of climate change. So that I'm a little, part of the thing I struggle with is how to make these recommendations durable over time. As I understood it from the meeting, you can have specifications in the standards, and then you can have commentary that points you to specific products that might be usable at different times. That's just one of the issues that the huge time spans involved in this, and time lags in a changing climate. Just came out as one of the sort of challenges of doing this, moving this forward. I mean, there will be 2 rounds of CMIP. There will be more downscaling methods. There will be all sorts of change factors. One of the suggestions was to key things on global warming levels, which I didn't hear anything about in this presentation. But since you're using global air temperature as a correlate, it would be really wonderful if this product could also have a global warming level sort of indexed output. That's all. That's sort of my commentary.
Thank you, Joe. We appreciate your comment, and we also kind of heard similar feedback from I think, and so a plan is also to look at how to investigate how to integrate the global warming level version of adjustment factors also for Atlas 15 application. But I appreciate the comment.
All right, thank you, Sandra. Bilal and then Don.
I have a question. First of all, thank you, Sandra and Fernando, for the informative presentation. I have been meeting regularly with USAID and MCC, and always the question comes up, and even the Coalition for Disaster Risk Management is the global coverage, right? I mean, they are looking at the US for leadership in this regard. So to what extent what you are doing, which is national, could be maybe help with others to build on and do it in other regions, particularly the global south.
Thanks, Dan. I just wanted to clarify one of Joe's comments there, and maybe misinterpreted, or maybe wasn't stated clearly, I guess, because I was the one stating it in Boulder. Yes, the document 2028 will probably not get adopted until many states until after 2030, 2031, someplace in there. And yes, in the commentary, you can point to websites. However, the data that is voted on in the building code is set. It's not that you can say, use this procedure and then use additional data later on in the future. The data that, when it gets into the building code, is set. And so we have to, whatever we vote on and put in the 2028, and that gets adopted into the 2030 International Building Code, that data is set at that time. And because that's from a legal standpoint, it has to be set. The data has to be set. So it can't be adjusted by users in the future.
Thank you for clarifying.
Yeah.
All right. Any other questions or comments?